Hello and welcome to Torah Thoughts. I want to wish a Chag Sameach to everyone. Today is Yom Yerushalayim. Today is the 28th day of Iyar. It is the 53rd anniversary of the return of Jewish sovereignty to Yerushalayim after an absence of nearly 2,000 years. It is a major milestone in Jewish history, and no doubt another step towards the ultimate redemption. And I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes as to how it relates to this week's parsha. So this week's parsha, the portion of the Torah that we read this week, is Parshat Bamidbar, which means in the desert. So it opens up with Hashem talking to Moshe. Vadaber Hashem el Moshe. Hashem spoke to Moshe Bamidbar Sinai, in the Sinai desert. And this conversation takes place, interestingly enough, on the first day of the month of Iyar. So that's roughly 13 months, 12 and a half months after the nation of Israel has left Egypt. And again, Yom Yerushalayim, today, the 28th day of Iyar, also takes place in the month of Iyar. And there's no question that there is a significant relationship to what is discussed in this parsha to the concept of Yom Yerushalayim, as we'll see in a minute. So there are two things that are being discussed in this parsha. Generally, it is the counting it's a census of the population of the nation of Israel, but not the actual population. Among the 12 tribes, it is the count of males of army age 20 to 60, and among the Levites, the Leviim, it counts them from the age of 1 month until, I believe, the age of 50. So anyway, so that's one portion of the parsha, and the other portion is, it describes basically what would be the job of the Leviim, the Levites, in the context of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which later on this job was obviously extended to the Beit HaMikdash, the temple itself on our Temple Mount. And again, so the job of the Leviim in the Mishkan is being described, and today again is the anniversary of the recapturing of Jerusalem. And again, the center of Jerusalem, the meaning of Jerusalem, is the Har HaBayit, our Temple Mount, where the Levites are supposed to perform, and the Kohanim, of course, who are also from the tribe of Levi, are supposed to perform their duties in the Beit HaMikdash. Now, I see it of great significance. First of all, there's, again, nothing in the Torah is coincidence. Nothing in life is coincidence. And there's something very beautiful that you see as to how we can tell that the all scientific knowledge is in the Torah. So the Torah tells us that why were the Leviim chosen as the special tribe who would be exempted from army service? Because they belong to Hashem and they will perform the service of the Mishkan. That's their duty. Anyone, a male who's of army age, has to go serve in the army. Yes, that's right, has to go serve in the army. We're going to get back to that in a minute. But the Leviim don't. The Leviim are exempt because they serve in the Mishkan and then later on in the Beit HaMikdash. So why the Leviim? Because when the Jews received the Torah, they sinned with the sin of the golden calf, and they were punished for that, obviously, and they were considered now, they have, basically they became disqualified. You committed such a horrible act. The only tribe that did not commit this act, in fact, they went to war against the other 12 tribes for having sinned with the golden calf, that was the tribe of Levi. And so God said, because of that, the firstborn, the Bechor, right, they were reserved for God because God owns them, so to speak, on account of the fact that he spared the firstborn of Israel, where he killed the firstborn of everyone else on Passover. So therefore the firstborn belonged to him. They're special, and they were going to serve God in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, and before that in the Mishkan. Now, because the entire nation sinned with the golden calf, God says, well, the Leviim are going to replace the firstborn. They're the ones who are going to perform the tasks in the Mishkan, and later on again in the Beit HaMikdash. So now God says, well, let's take account. How many firstborn are there? How many Bechorim are there? Versus how many Leviim are there, to make sure that it's an even exchange. And it turns out that it's not an even exchange. Turns out that there were 22,000 Leviim who qualified. Who qualified to serve in the temple, but there were 22,273 Bechorim who qualified. So it wasn't an even exchange, and God says now you have to make up for those 273 extra people. You redeem those extra Bechorim, because they're ultimately not going to serve until Mashiach comes. They're not going to serve in the temple, so they have to be redeemed, and there was a certain amount of money that had to be paid by the Bechorim collectively to the Mishkan as a redemption for the shortage, let's say, of 273 people. Now, here's the interesting thing: the number 273. Again, there are no coincidences. Okay, what is the significance of the number of 273? Well, the Torah doesn't. How does the Torah describe in this parsha the firstborn? It doesn't simply say the Bechor, the firstborn. It says V'hine ve'ani, and I. Hine lakachti et Levim mitoch bnei Israel. Here, behold, I took the Leviim from among the children of Israel. Tachat, in exchange, kol Bechor peterechem. In exchange for each Bechor, peterechem, who breaches the womb, bnei Israel, from among the children of Israel. So it could have simply said Tachat kol Bechor bnei Israel. Instead, it says Tachat kol Bechor peterechem. Why does it add that word peterechem? Well, there are 273 extra Bechorim. 273 extra firstborns, and the significance of that is peterechem. So here's the Torah telling us that for a baby to breach the womb of the mother, peterechem, there's a significant number here, 273. Well, no one knew this back then. Today we know. How long does a pregnancy take? We know that it's 9 months, and for very long we knew that it was 9 months. People see a woman knows when she gets pregnant, but the exact amount, today we consider it 40 weeks. The reason why if a woman goes to an OBGYN, finds out she's pregnant, they'll calculate back from when. Nobody knows the actual date of conception, usually. You can't scientifically calculate that, but you can calculate when was the woman's last menstrual cycle, and then they go from there forward. And they say 40 weeks. Everyone knows that a woman cannot get pregnant during her menstruation. That's scientifically impossible. The woman gets pregnant roughly a week or two later when she ovulates. And so what is the actual gestation period? 273 days. Peterechem. And so that's just an aside thing that we can tell from there. Again, there's no coincidences in life, there are no coincidences in the Torah, and every bit of scientific information that exists, even the stuff we're going to be finding out in the next 100 to the next 1,000 years, is already in the Torah. Anyway, getting back to our the topic here. So what we have here is the Torah is telling us you're going to have an army, and that army is directly connected to the service of the Beit HaMikdash. How so? We see that now with the connection to what happened in the 6 Day War, the greatest military victory in history. The greatest military victory in history, I would say, has to be the 6 Day War. In 6 days, an under-equipped army, which had to rely on miracles, even though they didn't admit the miracles after the victory. We talked about that last week. They defeated 3 armies way more powerful than them. The miracle they were hoping for was to survive the war. Not only did they survive the war, they demolished their enemies and did the impossible, or what was thought impossible. They came back to Jerusalem. That's such a huge celebration, coming back to Jerusalem, the significance of today, coming back to Jerusalem. But what happened? The following day was also a day of great tragedy. The Israeli general, who was now at that point already the defense minister, Moshe Dayan, the man who was famous for unfortunately having one eye, he came up to the Temple Mount and gave it back to the Jordanian Waqf, that is the Muslim religious authority who was in charge of overseeing the mosques up on the Temple Mount, the day after the greatest victory in the history, certainly in modern history, of the Jewish nation. He went and gave it to them. We mourn the loss of the Beit HaMikdash. We mourn the loss of the Har HaBayit, the loss of Jerusalem for 2,000 years. Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. And this guy did it all in one fell swoop, just gave it to them. And we learn here, you have an army. The purpose of armies, the purpose of the victories that God promised us, was not so that you can have glory and victory. In fact, we take away a chunk of the army to do what? So that victory will serve for the Beit HaMikdash. And that is a lesson that we learn from this parsha, that this beloved general, please don't quote me on that word beloved, he went and threw it all away. But there's another significant lesson that we learn in this parsha. We learn from here that every single Jewish male of appropriate age had to serve in the army. You have to fight. You have to defend the country, except for the Levim, because they had to do a job that God set aside. That was a job that took precedent for them. Today we have a controversy again. It's a major controversy, and we're going to see it unfold again now that the Israeli government they've built a government finally. We're going to see where a lot let's call them the Haredim. That's how they're the most widely known. But many religious yeshivas, religious leaders, don't want their followers to go to the army, and the argument that you hear very often is, oh well, we study Torah, that takes precedent, and they'll make two comparisons. They'll make two analogies as to why it's okay, why it's appropriate for them to say, well, I'm going to study Torah, and therefore I don't have to serve in the army. One is, well, I'm just like the Leviim. The Leviim, back then, they served in the Beit HaMikdash. Today we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, and the argument is that the study halls of Torah have replaced the Beit HaMikdash until the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt, God willing. And therefore we service in the study halls of Torah just like the Leviim served in the Beit HaMikdash. Well, I have to say that we can see from this Parsha that argument doesn't hold water. Why? The great victory that we had, okay, we lost the Beit HaMikdash. It was torn away from our victory. Today there's talk about a new minister of internal security in Israel. His name escapes me at the moment, but there's speculation that he might give the Jews back access to go back to the Temple Mount. And to be honest with you, I think about it, and I don't think that we should be careful what we want. Why? Physically, logistically, it was never a problem for us to take back the Temple Mount. We could always have undone in the past 53 years the horrible tragedy of what Moshe Dayan did. The question is, were we mentally ready for it? And were we spiritually ready for it? And I believe, when you think about it, that we weren't. Why? Because the danger is, if the Jews take over the Beit HaMikdash, the Jews take over the site of the Beit HaMikdash, the holy, our Temple Mount, what would happen to it? How would the Israeli government treat it? Would the Israeli government allow free access for all religions to come and worship up there? Could you imagine if Buddhists and Christians and monks and Hindus and God knows what other idol-worshipping religion were allowed to go up on the holiest of holies and do their idol worship up there? Now, if that were to happen, I got to tell you right now, I'd much rather have the Muslims up there, because the Muslims, by most opinions, what they do is not true the religion that they practice, but it's not idol worship, because they believe in the one and only Creator. Right? So that's one question. And let's say if it was only the Jews that were up there, would we have the women of the wall demanding that women can also be Kohanim? Or would we demand now to have gay and transsexual Kohanim? Would we demand to have a minyan up there that's made up of ecumenical services? Who knows what? And the minister of internal security, that the speculation now, why does that all come up in my mind? The speculation that the minister of internal security wants to allow Jewish access back up there. You wonder, is there going to be a museum up there within a year from now? Where people are going to get to come up there and walk through it like it was, well, a museum. And he's famous, this particular minister of security is famous for being the very first openly gay Knesset member in the Israeli Knesset. Now again, it's not for me to judge his lifestyle. Certainly, and this is not a knock against homosexuals. It's a knock against homosexuality. What he does is his business, and God will certainly judge him for it. But do we want to have that kind of life where Torah isn't prominent? Do we want to have that kind of culture go back up onto the Har Bayit, or do we want the Jews to go up to the Har Bayit, but for the purpose of building a Beit HaMikdash, for the purpose of going up there and having the place run in accordance with Jewish law? And this brings us back to the comparison between when the Jews were in the desert, the comparison between the Jews who went to the army and the Leviim who served in the Beit HaMikdash, as a metaphor to what some people say today, that servicing in the study halls of Torah takes precedent over serving in the army. Because if those Jews were really that intent of being the metaphorical Leviim, then go and fight. You're not going to be in the army, great. Your task is to serve in the Beit HaMikdash. Fight for a Jewish, not just Jews, but a Jewish control of the Har Bayit, and that it should be respected in accordance with Torah laws and Torah tradition. rather than having the secular, ungodly, even though some of them mean well, an Israeli government who prides itself in how secular they are, rather than having them open up the Temple Mount for everyone, and we may end up, God forbid, having an even worse situation than it is now with the Muslims controlling it. Rather than that, why don't you fight for a Jewish face on the Har HaBayit? Now, the other argument that you're going to hear from people who don't want religious yeshiva students to go to the army is that, well, there's a Yisachar and Zevulun dynamic going on in Israel. What is the Yisachar and Zevulun dynamic? Well, we know that in the times of the kingdom of Israel, what happened was there was some sort of a dynamic between the tribes of Yisachar and Zevulun, which their father Yaakov predicted on his deathbed. What happened was the tribe of Zevulun were known to be they were very good at business. They traveled a lot. They did a lot of business transactions, and they made money. The tribe of Yisachar were known to be very they were scholars. They studied Torah a lot, and there was always this relationship between the two tribes where people from the tribe of Zevulun would support financially with the money from all the business that they made. They would support people from the tribe of Yisachar, and the tribe of Yisachar would share in their business profits, while the people from the tribe of Zevulun would share in the credit for the Torah study that the person from the tribe of Yisachar is doing. So in other words, if someone from the tribe of Yisachar spends an entire week studying Torah, but he's able to do that because if he's getting support from someone from Zevulun, they both share equally in that credit, just like they both share equally in the income. And that's the dynamic that many people describe. Well, when you're out there fighting a war, I'm here studying Torah, it's a Yisachar Zevulun. We both get to share that, the credit for both. Well, what do you know? The Torah addresses that as well. We know that not all of Israel has come back. Not all of the nation of Israel has come back yet. Okay, we know that the Jews have come back. Why is there a synonym, so to speak, for the nation of Israel? We say the Jewish nation, because the nation of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, split at some point, and there was 10 tribes that made up the kingdom of Israel, and the other 2 tribes, Benjamin and Yehuda, with the ruling tribe being Yehuda, they made up the kingdom of Yehuda. It was known as the kingdom of Yehuda, and people living in Yehuda were known as Yehudim. The 10 tribes that made up the kingdom of Israel, they were overrun by Assyria. They were taken captive, and they have not yet returned. There's rumors, there's speculation that some of them have returned, and they're still doing research on that. But by and large, they haven't yet returned. Certainly in 1948, they hadn't returned. In 1967, they hadn't returned yet. The first ones to return were the ones that were left when the kingdom of Judah was left, the tribes of Benjamin and Yehuda and Benjamin, and they were known as Yehudim, Jews. The Jews were left in the area of Israel even when they were exiled. They were taken to Persia, they were taken to Babylonia. First Babylonia, which became Persia, they came back. Even during the times of the Roman rule, when we were exiled, we always knew that we were Jews, and eventually we came back. In 1948, when the Jews came back, it was primarily the kingdom of Judah. People from the tribe of Yehuda and Benjamin, mainly the tribe of Yehuda. And lo and behold, the Leviim, the Levites that were given their instructions on how to service in the Beis Hamikdash, they were also given instructions on where to camp. Everybody camped around the Mishkan, rather, the temporary temple, and so did all the 12 tribes. So you had 3 tribes that camped to the east of the Mishkan, 3 tribes to the west of the Mishkan, 3 tribes camped to the north, and 3 tribes to the south. And what you ended up having was, this is how they traveled also. And so the tribes that camped to the east of the Mishkan, they were the first 3 tribes also to arrive. They were in the front. They were the first 3 tribes to move towards the land of Israel. And who were those 3 tribes? The tribes of Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zevulun. So the tribe of Yehuda, turns out historically, was also the first ones to come back to Israel in modern times. But we know that Yisachar and Zevulun have not yet come back. So what's the significance of that? Why were they in the front? Why did they flank the tribe of Yehuda when we know that historically that's not what happened when they came back? Well, I believe that's to give us a message regarding the relationship between Yisachar and Zevulun and this whole dynamic of going to the army and not going because you're serving and studying Torah. It's true. The tribe of Yisachar and Zevulun had this dynamic where one tribe, they conducted business and the other tribe studied Torah. But what we see here in the instructions that Hashem gave, that God gave, with respect to counting the army-aged males, was both the tribe of Yisachar and Zevulun went out front. One tribe specialized in studying Torah. The other tribe specialized in doing business. Both of them were front and center when it came to war. So that Yisachar Zevulun thing is not an excuse either. What's the answer? We have to live by Torah. We have to live by, not Das Torah, Torah. We have to live by the mitzvahs that the Torah gave us, and we have to believe what we mean when we ask God to give us back a Beis Hamikdash. We all celebrate the coming back of Jerusalem, and I believe today I said Hallel. I believe this is an actual. It's a holiday where if you thank Hashem for anything, you got to thank Hashem for this. You got to thank God for bringing us back to Jerusalem. But if we're going to be honest, why are we thanking God for bringing us back to Jerusalem? Because Ben Yehuda Street looks so beautiful? Because of all the beautiful shops on Rehov Yafo and King George Street? Of course not. It's because this opens up the gates for us to build a Beit HaMikdash. And if you're not begging and crying and yearning that you want the Beit HaMikdash, you have no reason to celebrate the return to Jerusalem. So let's do both. Chag Yom Yerushalayim Sameach. Celebrate the return to Jerusalem, and at the same time, let's look forward and take part actively in whatever way you can in bringing the day when we also celebrate the taking back of the Har HaBayit, undoing that horrible, horrible thing that Moshe Dayan did the following day. Looking back to undoing that, taking back the Har HaBayit, and God willing, building a Beit HaMikdash, and then let the Leviim go up and serve there. That's my Torah thought. What's yours? Thank you for watching. Shabbat Shalom.